This question was, for most of you, your nemesis, the river processes and pressures question. There was a barrier in your heads in a number of places which just said, can't do it. I believe you genuinely can do it, and we'll talk through why you can go about doing it, how you go about doing it. First question suggests one reason why location Y has been protected from flooding. I know a lot of you struggled to find why. Could have been partly down to the way it photocopied, but here is why here. Reasons behind why it should be protected from flooding. There's a school there. It's got a major road running through it. It's got good connections. There's lots of different ideas of different things you could talk about. Vulnerable land, urbanised, it's populated, lots of different ideas which you can use. Okay, most of you came up with one idea once you had found Y. Second question, X is located on a washland, a method of soft engineering. Explain why the washland at X will reduce the risk of flooding at Y. This required you to apply knowledge about soft engineering. You haven't necessarily studied washland, but you've studied soft engineering. It was thinking about how you can apply those ideas across. There's lots of different ways of getting the marks. You got 1 mark for each valid statement. Excess river water floods the washland, therefore the river's discharge is reduced. Fair enough, fine. The downstream water is then contained. It prevents the destruction of that land. It stores the water. The water will infiltrate into the washland. Lots of different ideas, all of which will reduce the risk of flooding. If you didn't get 3 marks, go through your answer, look at what you needed to do to develop it. And finally, for the rivers question was this. Remember, this question has spelling, punctuation and grammar attached to it as well. Therefore, you must look to write something. Some of you left this blank and as a consequence dropped 11 marks on your paper. That was about 3 grade boundaries. Examine the impact of geology and slope processes on river valley shape. You can use a diagram to support your answer if you wanted to. I've put the entire mark scheme on here. It talks about geology and how geology can affect it, and then it talks about slope processes. For geology, we're really looking for one of 2 things, or 2 different things: V-shaped valleys and waterfalls, both of which are affected by geology. Waterfalls is the easier. Could have talked about the River Tees and High Force Waterfall and the bands of hard and soft rock there. In fact, that what the hard rock is more resistant than the soft rock, and as a consequence waterfalls develop and you get gorges. That was one answer. Second answer was slope processes. This is where a lot of you stumbled. This was requiring you to talk about weathering and mass movement, and the fact that weathering occurs at the top of V-shaped valleys, and as a consequence you get mass movement down the slopes, and then picking up on different types of weathering, such as chemical, biological. Some of you had a good attempt at talking about freeze-thaw weathering at different in this question, but it was about the explanation, and you really did struggle. Read through the mark scheme and think about what was required to develop the answer. Pause it and have a go. Once you've done that, here is an example of a question which got 8 marks plus 3. Have a read of it and figure out why it got 8 marks. If you've done all that, here's a couple of questions to think about. Describe how a waterfall forms in the upper course of a river. For 3 marks, these short answer questions could be coming from anywhere. Likelihood is they're going to be talking about river processes next year. And then examine the impacts of flooding in the known location. Again, this 8 mark question is likely to be about flooding at some point in time in the future. So again, focus on that and develop your answers. Okay, hopefully that's helped you with the rivers.